Again. Good evening and welcome to this evening's event, the Roundtable, where we'll be discussing the community perspectives on the future of cybersecurity in Europe. We have a very exciting lineup of many members of cybersecurity communities across Europe. But to start with, we will, as usual, start with welcome from our hosts. We thank the representation of the state of Hessen to the EU for collaborating with CyberSec4Europe on this event. And we have a welcome from Mark Weinmeister, who is the Secretary of State for European Affairs of the state of Hessen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to warmly welcome you to tonight's roundtable discussion under the title Community Perspectives on the Future of Cybersecurity in Europe. It's a great pleasure to welcome you back, at least in part, to our representation in person. But I would also like to extend a warm welcome to those of you who have joined us virtually today.
And thank you, Herr Weinmeister, for that splendid introduction. I'd like to hand over, and I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping, first of all, to keep your microphones off, and thank you all already for not switching on your cameras, except for the presenters and speakers later on. I'd like to now hand over to Kai Rannenberg, who is the coordinator of CyberSec4Europe, for his welcome address.
Thanks a lot, David, and thanks a lot for all of you who came, especially those of you who are coming in as knights into this discussion, but also all of you who are coming for the first time and those who returned to CyberSec4Europe and our events, because we actually have a number of new faces or new names in our participant list, as we noticed, and we have some people who are coming back. Both is a good sign. But still, I'm going to tell a little bit more about CyberSec4Europe. If we go one slide further, this is an overview of the CyberSec4Europe architecture with its 4 pillars that we're working on. Today's pillar mainly is the governance design and pilot pillar that we will have a discussion based upon. But of course, we also have the pillars that are working in the area of research, innovation, and industry, putting up new demonstrators and new research results and combining them all together into also research roadmaps. And we're working in education, certification, and standardization, and both in classic teaching but also in all kinds of cyber ranges and things. And then last but not least, we're doing communication and community building here. So some of the results, if we can go to the next slides, you can see on the next thing some of the deliverables that we are and have produced. Obviously, most fitting to our today's discussion are the governance work package 2 deliverables D2.2 and D2.3 about a governance structure, and especially some ideas for the community that we're also going to present today. If you're more into further research and an application of research activities, these deliverables that you find, I'm not going to read them out all, 312, 4454 are of interest to you. They show how we are integrating research and application areas. And if you want to see something new on the new teaching and testing of tools, then the virtual lab described in 7.2 is of interest. And policy recommendations, again, actually has quite a bit of a relation to what we're doing today. And if you have remembered but don't remember in detail our big convergence event from last November, D10.2 can help your memory. And if you don't know what that all is about, and again, it's a useful delivery to look at. All of them can be found on the CyberSec4Europe website and can be downloaded there together with many, many others. But this was just a small selection, and I want to be fast here and don't steal too much time from our speakers. So just one other slide, which is the next one. And that is about upcoming events. There will be a PhD winter school that CyberSec4Europe, together with our fellow pilots, is active in Trento, near Trento, actually, hopefully also in person, but maybe also hybrid. There is our cyber range activity that you, once the slide goes back, see again but that's fully virtual, and we can actually, participation is still possible if you contact us. And of course, there will be a convergence conference, and that will be possibly hybrid. It will be in Brussels. And by the way, as Mark Weinmeister already said, some of us are now here actually in the Brussels representation. What you see behind me is one of the rooms. And if you have a good view, you can maybe see a little bit over Brussels. So we're testing out hybrid meetings here. And it's working surprisingly well. At least we're having a good time here, and we already have been quite creative during today's meeting. But with that, I should hand over to David again and to the roundtable.
Thank you, Kai. So tonight's event is a roundtable, and we're very privileged to have, before we actually get round to the discussion, to have as our keynote speaker, Miguel Gonzalez Sancho, who is head of Unit 1 of DG Connect in the European Commission. But he is also, incidentally, the acting executive director of the new competence center in Bucharest as of last month. So we're hoping that Miguel will give us some insights into the progress on setting up the center, as well as the national coordination centers, which has some direct relevance to the conversation that we'll have slightly later on. So Miguel, if I could ask you to switch on your camera and microphone and share your thoughts with us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you.
Yeah. I'm trying to switch on the camera now. Just one sec. Can you see me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello. Good afternoon to everybody, and thanks a lot to CyberSec4Europe for this invitation, for this opportunity, and for organizing this event. So to warm up the panel, which is the most interesting piece of the evening, I think, with people coming from the community, the cyber community, which is the focus of tonight's event. I will indeed recap on the status of the competence center setup and the national coordination centers and the community. I really didn't know how to start, and then Mark Weinmeister gave me an idea. He mentioned two words which are quite important in this context, which are diversity and common framework. Diversity, there is diversity in this in the field of cybersecurity for sure, and this proposal of a common framework of a competence center, aims at providing a bit of a framework to structure the landscape, as it were. And I would add a third word to diversity and framework, which is priority, prioritization. And this is what the proposal was about, because this regulation that the Commission proposed and was adopted, entered into force, in June. It's very much a governance proposal. It's about precisely setting that framework, and it comes in three. Let's say, to simplify, it comes in three layers, if you like. The center, based in Bucharest, which would be the higher level, then the network of national coordination centers, and then the community, indeed. And actually, the origin of the proposal was very much at the level inspired by the community, was starting from a mapping of the expertise that exists in Europe, and from the realization that there's a lot of expertise out there, a lot of good developments happening, but perhaps it would be interesting to try and overcome fragmentation in a way and coordinate those efforts, but by no means in a top-down way, but rather, both directions at least. So provide some kind of decisions from the top, such as when funding programs, work programs are published. So there are some indications there, but also collecting the input from the community, as it were. That was the origin. Obviously, the broad objectives. This competence center proposal, it contributes to overall efforts of the European Union on cybersecurity to improve resilience, for sure, to preparedness against multiple cyber threats that have just increased with the pandemic, but also the opportunity side is quite important here. So the opportunity side, the fact that cybersecurity becomes a market opportunity more and more, and actually the future digital developments depend on cybersecurity being ensured. So I don't need to convince anyone about it here, but just to say that, of course, this new development is part of a broader effort at the European Union that is made up, consists of also of legislative measures, of policy coordination, funding efforts, and so. And this is in the context of a competence center proposal. So as David said, yes, I will make the point where we stand on this proposal quickly. I mentioned these three levels. Well, legally speaking, there is a competence center that is in place. As I said, the regulation entered into force in June, but that's a theory. Of course, now it's work in progress at all levels, at all those three levels that I mentioned before. Actually, the community is the one that already exists. I would say is the most concrete thing, is that we already have a very diverse and rich cyber community in Europe. But when it comes to the center itself, well, the governing board of the center made up of representatives from all member states and the Commission, with also ENISA as a permanent observer, had its first official meeting recently on the 20th of October, and started to work and with quite a few administrative decisions which are necessary in order for the this body to start functioning, but also starting to discuss a bit of substance, a bit of strategic, initial discussions about strategic priorities for the future and the strategic agenda of this of the center. There were preliminary discussions, and that's one level. The other level is the national coordination centers. So each member state should have a national coordination center under this proposal, and this is what member states are putting up together now. And then they have until the end of this year to put forward their national coordination centers. And then there is some deadlines because it is foreseen that there would be European Union funding to support the national coordination centers, and this would come from the Digital Europe program that was officially adopted last week. And this call for a first call to support national coordination centers will be issued next year, kind of probably in February. It will be open in February, and then there will be a second one later in the year at the Digital Europe program. We have started discussing with member states about the national coordination centers. We had several meetings already. The last one was 28th of October, and it was very much about practicalities, about how to avail the national coordination centers could avail themselves of that funding that I just mentioned. But it was also about what to do, basically, what would be the the mission of let's say the services that the national coordination centers should offer, the membership, how to go about the membership, so that who from the community, how members, representatives from the cyber community could become officially, partners, so registered in the national coordination centers, and about communication, how to work together, and so on and so forth. So here again, going back to the words diversity and framework, that's quite important. It is clear that at that level, it's member states who are going to decide very much how they organize matters at home. But I think there's this shared willingness, because member states agreed on this regulation together, to have some form of coordination as well, to compare notes, as it were, to exchange across borders and facilitate that collaboration. So this is precisely what is being now discussing, and with the establishment of the national coordination centers, in parallel to each member state establishing its own national coordination center. Work in progress. Just to give the pointers, the Commission issued a communication on the 19th of October about conditions, requirements for national coordination centers to use EU funding that will come up in support, as I said, from the Digital Europe program. National member states can present their candidates, and then they can apply for that funding if they so wish. This is where we stand. So of course, very soon, the governing board, the European Competence Cybersecurity Competence Center will continue meeting regularly in order to go further, define the agenda, and then to establish the center proper physically in Bucharest. So getting to the let's say the level, the basis, which is the cyber community, and which is the main focus of this meeting today. Well, as I said, this existed already. This was the reality there, that there's this diverse community, cyber community in Europe, and it was actually as I said before, also the initiation of the inspiration of the Commission proposal. There are relevant, there's relevant efforts already also in place at national level, but at European level, certainly, to articulate, to coordinate, to kind of facilitate collaboration in the community. In particular, the EXO, the European Cybersecurity Organization, has been active for a while, and with a partnership with the European Commission for a number of years under the previous program Horizon 2020. And initially, the focus was very much on cybersecurity research, but this has, on the side of EXO and the collaboration with the Commission, this has developed a lot in many directions, on many issues there. So that's a good basis when it comes to the cybersecurity industry and beyond. And then it was agreed also to launch what we call the pilots, some pilots, cybersecurity competence pilots, of which CyberSec4Europe is one of them. And the 4 of them were launched some time ago, with also very much this, let's say, this ambition of course, to develop research work, but also to structure the cooperation. And now, well, this event today is part of this effort to precisely coordinate the efforts in the community. So this is where we start now. For details, I mean, not for details, but there are some indications in the regulation itself about the cyber competence community. In particular, there's this Article 8 that talk about it, mentions that, well, the mission of the community very broadly are, to support the missions of the competence center that are defined in another article. It's pretty consensual for as objectives. And then this idea of expertise is stressed very much. This idea of enhance expertise, share expertise, disseminate. That's at the core of the community. Who is considered there as part of the cyber community? Well, in this article, it is a very broad church, I would say, because there's reference to industry, but also academia and research, relevant civil society organizations, and a requirement that for being considered part of this community, let's say, there must be, again, a certain expertise to contribute with in terms of research or industrial kind of contribution, or education is mentioned, or incident response. I mean, many things. There's also a reference that's also in the article to the fact that this community, in the sense of the regulation here of the competence center and network of national coordination centers, should be made up of entities, let's say, based in Europe. So that's also a message that is passed. And then there's also some other indications about how formalize a bit this community membership. But this level is not. The requirements are very loose, because there's no particular obligation either attached or funding, let's say, benefits attached for being a member of the community. I'm not gonna say much more, because I was already long enough. I just will repeat what I said before. At the origin of this proposal that the Commission put on the table some time ago, and then eventually the Council and Parliament adopted in the form of this regulation, the community, the cyber community, was very much, the reason for this, with let's say, the kind of assumption that there's a lot of expertise in Europe. I insist on the word again, but there's probably perhaps a certain degree of fragmentation, and in any case, perhaps we wouldn't be making in Europe as much as we could from all that expertise, in order to raise up to the challenges that we face on cybersecurity, cybersecurity threats, but also cybersecurity opportunities, market opportunities. That was the whole idea. There to leverage that potential and to make the most out of it. That led to this proposal to have a structure with the center at the top. The center being very much about identifying priorities for investment in cybersecurity, and then implementing those priorities, strategic priorities. The national coordination centers then about really being this, let's say, intermediary level, helping articulate at the community at national level and leverage that expertise, and also with the possibility of using funding, national and EU, to support that. And then the community that will be well, the subject of the panel that will follow. And I would be personally very interested in hearing from views, because this is not an easy task. I mean, having all this expertise around, but at the same time trying to coordinate and make something bigger out of it. This is what it's about, and not an easy thing, because actually flexibility needs to be, of course, allowed. Yeah, but then at the same time, can we coordinate and collaborate in a way that the total would be bigger than their parts. I stop here. Hope that was enough for to kickstart the discussion then later. Thanks a lot, David. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Miguel. That was splendid, and a really good introduction to this evening's discussion. And I think picking on the two words that you did, framework and diversity, was a good theme for the evening. What you've talked about is very much the framework that exists, that came through the regulation, and which you are setting, and the Commission is driving and setting in place now. And you also indicated the role for the communities that we're going to hear from. And the diversity, I think, comes the further down you get the stack, the more diverse it gets, as we will see later on. You also mentioned that one of the roles of the 4 pilots was to look at the relationship between the center, the coordination centers, and the community. And within CyberSec4Europe, Natalia Kadenko has been leading that work on governance for us. And I'm going to hand over to Natalia to give us a few words to start the discussion later. Natalia.
Thank you, David. I will not take too much of everybody's time, because I think we all want to hear what our excellent participants have to say. The main concepts have been outlined very nicely by Miguel: diversity, also potential, sharing, expertise, and of course coordination. So to keep it very brief, tonight we're going to provide not just some sky-colored space for some of the bright stars on the European sky, but also hopefully draw some new lines that haven't been there before and place new constellations on the European cybersecurity map. Without further ado, I entrust us all into the capable hands of David, the moderator.
Thank you, Natalia. So if I could ask the participants, from the representatives of the 7 communities, to switch on their cameras and and we'll look to hear from each of them in turn. Anyone else who's got their camera on, could you please switch it off? So Christian, Matteo, Celia, and James, and Eddie, and Juan. So I think we have a full complement. Thank you all very much for joining. And Yanis, yes, hello Yanis. So you've all heard Miguel's introduction. I assume that most of you are very familiar with much of what he said. And as representatives of different communities, the diversity of the communities in the diverse countries of the European Union, we would like to hear your responses and also your expectations and aspirations on the development of these plans for the cybersecurity communities within Europe. In in no particular order, I would ask, say, Matteo from Italy to kick us off with your thoughts.
Sure. Thank you very much, David, and thank you to CyberSecurity for Europe for the invitation to contribute to this panel. My name is Matteo Lucchetti. I'm the director of the Cyber4.0, the National Cybersecurity Competence Center in Italy. This is a public-private partnership that has been initiated and started in the framework of the Industry 4.0 work program in Italy, and is part of a group of 8 competence centers that have been promoted and funded by the Italian Ministry of Economic Development. Each of them has a specific objective, a specific goal, and Cyber 4.0 is the one that is dedicated to cybersecurity. So it's a bit different from the other competence centers that are more focused on smart manufacturing and the applications in the manufacturing industry. Our target is mostly, I would say, public administration and small and medium enterprises in terms of the competencies that we provide. And I was mentioning it's a public-private partnership, meaning we have a number of universities, training institutions that are part of the constituency of Cyber 4.0. We have some public entities, and we have, I would say, a very large representation of the private sector, and I would say the main players in Italy when it comes to cybersecurity. Very big companies that have developed a strong focus on cybersecurity. Our, let's say, observation point is quite privileged, I would say, because we are connecting the dots between the public administration and the private sector, and we are trying to support industries to develop their competencies and to strengthen their capacities in the cybersecurity arena. Our 3 lines of activities are mostly on capacity building, so on training, on orientation to the market, and on the promotion of research and innovation projects. So with this meaning, we are trying to fill that last mile that research products need to get to the market, so to production. So our research and innovation programs that we fund start from a maturity level quite high. This is just to frame the point of observation we have, and I would say that, of course, we are eager to contribute to the development and to the full operational activities of the European Cybersecurity Competence Centers. We have started our contacts as well with the governing board that was mentioned before. So we had a webinar just last week with a member of the governing board that was anticipating some of the points that were made today by our keynote speaker. The main issues that we see in Italy are certainly related to, at least with respect to our target communities, so public administration and small and medium enterprises, are certainly related to a lack of competencies that need to be addressed in a systematic manner. we had several problems. Perhaps some of you got to know about the attacks that have been carried out against the health system in Italy, and now there is the need to act not just on the technical level, which is of course of paramount importance, but also in terms of upskilling and also, I would say, reskilling those that are dealing with information security in the sector. But sometimes what we find is also the need to create a bunch of new competencies. So it's not just upskilling and reskilling, but I would say also and especially creating new skills. And to do this, of course, we cannot rely only on academia, because we need skills that are available in relatively short time. We need programs that are suited to the specific problems of these sectors, of the say weakest rings of the chain. In the Italian context, small and medium enterprises are very much exposed, and of course represent a large part of the businesses, like everywhere in Europe. But also public administration is in high need of strengthening competencies. So I would say that on these, one of the main points that we should somehow look at is that of creating programs that are sustainable. So in a way that the competence centers or public-private partnerships like ours, so the community members, could somehow create a trigger to stimulate sectors to create internal competencies, and then these internal competencies to be shared and to be used to further replicate the courses, or anyway any kind of initiative that could strengthen competencies. So the point that we have to keep in mind is that of sustainability. Also, another point that we see is we can identify vulnerabilities, we can identify gaps to be filled, but also take into account what is really affordable for our target groups. So these programs have to depart from an accurate analysis of the current context, an accurate assessment of what is actually feasible for the beneficiaries of our action, and plan differentiated plans and differentiated initiatives with respect to our different constituencies.
Thank you, Matteo.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think
Sure.
Thank you for that comprehensive overview of what's happening in Italy. I think we need to hear from some of the others.
Sure.
Because we've got a lot of views to hear from. So just randomly, Eddie, how does what Matteo was saying resonate with the experiences in the Netherlands? What are your challenges? And what are your aspirations?
Yes, I can dive into that. Thank you, David, and Matteo also. My name is Eddie Boot. I'm the director of the Decipher collaboration platform in the Netherlands. This is a public-private platform. It's independent, though it's established by the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate in the Netherlands, as will be the forthcoming National Coordination Center. So we won't be an NCC, but it will be instituted close relation to design. I think there are a lot of commonalities in what Matteo says about the situation in Italy as well for us. Decipher aims from like really early fundamental academic research throughout the whole innovation chain, also in implementation and valorization. So to really have an economic effect of cybersecurity in the Netherlands as well. And we, well, there are a lot of valleys of death along the way between research and actual implementation. And Decipher tries to program sustainable roadmaps, and that really resonates as well with me, as Matteo just explained. It's required to have multi-year research on certain topics to really get them through the whole innovation chain from academic research towards really implementation and making money of it. Also, valorization on cybersecurity in the Netherlands is pretty difficult. Our cybersecurity market is rather small, it's fragmented. There are a lot of dependencies with foreign software. So to create your own cybersecurity solution in a small country as the Netherlands, it's quite a challenge. So we need all the resources that we have. And we're also limited by the number of cyber security experts as well. Just as Matteo said, the cyber workforce development is a very important team as well to get those people available soon in the field. And I think that will be a wide addressed topic, I guess, with the other participants as well tonight. Basically, to end the aspirations of Decipher are to increase the cybersecurity experts in the Netherlands, to gain an advantage of the already excellent R&D level that we are in the Netherlands, and mainly to translate that R&D level towards implementation and valorization. That's it for now, David.
Thank you, Eddie. So you made an important point there about the difficulties in a small country like the Netherlands, small but industrious, and the valorization of the work done in academia. Maybe it would be interesting to hear now from Christian, who comes from not such a small country, Germany, and see whether the same issues apply in Germany. So Christian.
Yeah, thank you, David. I don't know why I expected now that it's my time now. As you said, a smaller country, now switching over to a larger country. Hello to everybody. My name is Christian Mugalla. I'm head of the division International Cybersecurity and Cybersecurity Research in the German Ministry of the Interior for Building and Community. Very glad to be a part of this panel. I would have even been happier to be with you in Brussels, but yeah, as we all know, it is not possible. Well, the Competence Center lies deep in my heart because maybe you know that it was actually a splendid group of my division who led all the negotiations for the trilogue of this regulation together and in good contact with the team of Miguel and the colleagues from the Parliament. And it's almost exactly 1 year ago that we finalized the trilogue. Now we have the regulation, and now we have to eat up the pudding, I suppose. And what we do in Germany is we have decided to set up our National Coordination Center completely on the public sector. It will be a cooperation of existing structures led by our National Security Agency, the BSI. And there is a ministerial steering group composed out of the Ministry of the Interior, Ministry of Economics, Ministry of Research, and Ministry of Defense, because also cyber defense plays a role, so to speak, in this competence center approach. Well, I think the situation in Germany is not so different from what you said, Eddie, from the situation in the Netherlands. I think we have a very good and renowned cybersecurity research community. Well, you might see it from our host today, Kai Rannenberg and his team, being a German professor on cybersecurity. I think there is much, there is a large landscape. We have also an industry specialized on digitization, specialized on cybersecurity, and also a large industry that is not rooted in digitization and is on its way to face the challenges of the new cyber world for traditional industries. But where I think we are still lacking in a good networking between these branches. We have good research results, and then we too often have the frustrating experience that we have to rebuy the results of these research efforts from foreign countries. And I don't mean European countries, which would be very gladly acceptable. But yeah, these are actually countries from far away. It's not always the US, also other countries turn up more and more. And this is, I don't think it's a very intelligent way to spend European taxpayers' money to fund in research. And then afterwards, you have to buy the products from abroad. And it is also not ideal with you on this magic buzzword of digital sovereignty. Because this is a concern to many of us that we have lost leadership in key technologies in large parts of digitization. Yeah, well, I don't want to go too deep into that, but when we had the discussion about 5G infrastructures, well, it turned out that it is not that easy to rely solely on European vendors for these products. And I think we have to be better there. We have to be better with our research efforts, with our funding efforts for small and medium-sized enterprises, bringing these together. And I think this is the most important task of the Competence Center in Bucharest. We are with very great expectations on the upcoming work of their strategic unit. And it will also be a main task for our national coordination centers and our national and European communities to bring this together, to enable good ideas born in Europe to be part of excellent products built in Europe. This must be our goal, and this is what we are working on. I think we will have more time to discuss detailed aspects on this in the remaining part of the discussion, and so I finish for now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, it's useful to acknowledge the role that your institute played in the setting up of the center through the trialogue. You mentioned that the National Coordination Center is going to be set up as part of a public administration. You also talked about the frustration of European digital sovereignty, which we can, anybody who wishes to pick up on that is more than welcome to do so. We can take it later. I wanted to turn to Juan in Spain and the direction that Spain is taking in setting up a national coordination center and how that differs from what we've heard from Germany.
Hi, good evening. Thanks, David, for giving me the floor. Thank you, CyberSec4Europe, for inviting me to participate on this roundtable. My name is Juan Dier. I'm the head of support to innovation and research at the National Cybersecurity Institute. That is an agency attached to the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Digital Transformation. So it's not a big difference with Christian mentioned before. From the Spanish approach, we are also organizing the National Coordination Center from the public side. And in our case, we found that INCIBE, the company I represent, is already doing many of the things that are expected for the National Coordination Center to do. So it was not that difficult for all of the competent authorities in the framework of the National Cybersecurity Council to appoint INCIBE to be the National Coordination Center. So that's basically what we are doing. We are trying to finish our constitution to meet the deadline in the 29th of December to nominate our National Coordination Center. We see the community as a crucial issue, as a crucial point. So the creation of that national community, it's very, very important for us, and we don't have a magical solution. So we are expecting some guidelines, some recommendations especially from EXO, since EXO has a lot of experience on creating a community or organizing a community, and then it's a very good success story. Also from the pilot projects, you've been working on the field for almost 3 years, so your experience is also very important for us. Also from, I think, I think in the previous workshop that the Commission organized with the different member states in last October, talking about national coordination centers, I think that also the governing board is going to try to create some guidelines and commonalities for the member states to organize that community. And it is challenging because there is an already community out there, but we have to make it, to provide some governance, to make it useful in the framework of this regulation. So it has to be useful for this center and for this initiative, and that's challenging. Fortunately, I think in Spain we have a very good experience. In the framework of the National Cybersecurity Strategy, there is an operational instrument that is the National Cybersecurity Forum, and it's an already existing community. You have to be invited in order to be part of it. The National Cybersecurity Directorate is inviting different institutions to participate, trying to have the most representative as possible, but with the less participants as desirable in order to be productive. So it started 1 year ago. It has some already working groups, and I think it's an example of how to organize a community. But that's a different story. I think for this regulation, we can rely on that experience. But I understand that must be different because it has to be very diverse. You have to allow all interested entities to participate. So in this case, to keep it as minimal as possible, I think it's not a good idea. I think we also have to talk to digital innovation hubs. They are also organizing a regional community. So we have to talk to many different experiences, also associations. We have associations in Spain representing academia, also representing industry. So it's challenging, and we don't have a solution. So we are expecting to receive feedback or input from EXO, from pilots, from probably also from the Commission. I don't know, as many input as possible, because we see it, the creation of the community as a tough, challenging mission. As soon as we are up and ready, hopefully the beginning of next year, I think it's going to be challenging for all of us, different member states. Flexibility is great because we have many specificities on all different member states, but I think that some common criteria, especially for the membership. So maybe some criteria to allow entities to be part of that community would be also helpful and really welcome. So that's my contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juan Diaz. I think you picked up on one of the things you said latterly there. Comes back to this D word, diversity. The issue of bringing together the different groups, the communities, the regions, and that was also mentioned by Christian from Germany. You also mentioned, thank you, the role of the 4 pilots and EXO. And I guess one of the questions that would be good to know, particularly for Natalia, who is responsible for governance in the project, is how in the latter stages of the 4 pilots, we can help create these commonalities and guidelines that you referred to. So we can pick up, any of you can pick up on that, but let's finish the round table. I'll turn to Yanis from Greece. From what you heard from the others, how do you feel about your aspirations for what the center and the national coordination centers can do in Greece? And do you see the same issues that the others have raised?
Thank you very much, David, for the floor and for the opportunity to participate in today's very interesting discussion. Let me first present myself. I am Yannis Alexakis. I am head of the Directorate of Cybersecurity Strategic Planning in the National Cybersecurity Authority of Greece. I would like to start by saying that the planning for our national cybersecurity establishment is under development. We are very much directed towards a centralized structure, which will be situated within the boundaries of a public authority and will operate by taking account of the community's input through frequent consultations and structured processes which will be in place shortly. Possibilities of cooperation with an affiliated entity or more affiliated entities regarding the management of funding are also under examination, and it seems to be the most effective option for us, so as to form a national competence, an NCC consortium. I'd like to stress that our cybersecurity authority, National Cybersecurity Authority, has a strong precedent in its collaboration with major academic institutions, which are situated in important business hubs in different cities and retain strong relations with the local business communities. Our collaboration, materialized under program agreements, provides a valuable input in the process of implementing our national cybersecurity strategy. So we consider such mutually beneficial agreements as pivotal in developing the national cybersecurity community, and in this respect in obtaining the EU cybersecurity goals. Our main priority sectors, especially nowadays, that since during the COVID-19 pandemic, Greece is undergoing a major digital transitions, especially in the public sector, where a wide-ranging set of public services is undergoing extensive digitalization, but also in private organizations and small and medium enterprises, which have started to acknowledge that cyber threats and are embedding cybersecurity considerations with greater reason in their strategies and their everyday operations. So in accordance with the European regulations and our national cybersecurity strategy, we aim to apply a holistic and balanced approach to developing cybersecurity capabilities by incorporating all critical sectors in our planning. We put particular emphasis on core social services, especially health, utilities, transport, public services. Also, economic activities such as e-commerce, logistics, and of course, supply chain security are areas of particular concern. We very much count on the NCC's contribution for implementing our national cybersecurity strategic objectives, especially regarding the provision of technical assistance and promotion of technological capabilities to relevant entities, with particular focus to public sector, our national critical entities, and of course, small and medium enterprises. Building SOCs or even a network of SOCs with our partners is a major priority for us. And we expect the ECCC in Bucharest to provide support in order with respect to building capacity in our NCC, as well as community building. We also consider the provision of financial support to third parties as a mobilization tool, since it will act as an incentive for entities to gain interest in being a part of the community. So I'd like, that was my contribution, and I would be very glad to answer any possible questions. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Yanis. We'll come to questions shortly. And as you'll have seen before, if you wish to ask a question, the way to do it is to put a question into the public chat, which you'll find on the left-hand side of the screen. And we can take the questions shortly. Celia, I'd like to turn to you now. So from your perspective, what are the difficulties you see in mobilizing the cybersecurity community in Norway? Particularly interested in, we've heard a number of people mention SMEs and the involvement in SMEs in your community activities. So any thoughts you have on that or any other matter, we'd be delighted to hear.
Well, thank you, David. I hope the sound is okay. So first, just thank you for the invitation from the organizers, and especially to Natalia and David. I also want to say hello to the fellow panelists and anyone listening. I'm very happy to be here, but I'm also a little bit apologetic because, as what probably many of you already know, Norway is not yet fully associated to the Competence Center regulation. So we do not yet have a NCC, even though we are thankfully now fully associated to Digital and Horizon Europe. So hopefully it's just a matter of time. And then I guess I should also introduce myself. I work on Digital Europe as the national coordinator of the cybersecurity part of Digital Europe. So in doing that, I've been working with the NCP in the Horizon Europe for cybersecurity or cluster 3 and security, and we're looking at what are the needs in Norway, where are the gaps, what would be a good possible solution, even though we're not quite there yet in associating to the regulation nominating, but just to be prepared if the order should come from the highest political levels. And one of the things we see is something that has already been talked about tonight, and that is the challenge of bringing something from the research stage to the market, basically, to be able to be used and to be able to be disseminated more widely. One of the strengths in Norwegian digitization is that we have a very high level of trust and in the public, or from the public to the public sector, and we also have very good authentication and identity services. So that's usually the starting point that developers use when they try to create solutions domestically. But then at the same time, this hasn't really taken off to the point where you can start advertising it, on a bigger scale. And that's something that needs work. So I think one of the expectations, or hopes at least, from the community and also from the people that I've talked to at least, is that we can better learn how to close the gaps in the fragmentation. And that, as you mentioned, David, also includes SMEs. We have a problem with outreach, reaching all the way to the SMEs and being able to communicate the problems, or having them be able to communicate the problems up at a more higher central level. So it's definitely a hope of mine, at least, and also people that I've talked to, that if we are able to fully associate and we can join this competence center with our own NCC, that NCC can have such a role and fulfill that demand, because there really is a demand to connect between the research and then the industry, but also the SMEs who don't have the time to attend every arrangement and every info session that there is. So I think I will end there, if it's okay.
Yes, of course it's okay. Thank you very much for that very honest and transparent view of where things are in Norway. So last but by no means least, perhaps because my grandfather was from Ireland, I've left James to the last. James Caffrey represents Ireland on this evening's panel. I'd like to turn to you to sum up your thoughts on the role that the National Coordination Centre can play in Ireland, and what you would like to, I think this can be turned to all of the panelists, the areas that you would like to see the centre focus on through the funding programs that Miguel talked about earlier on, and what your aspirations are for this this great framework that the Commission has put in place. So over to you, James.
Thank you very much, David, and really appreciate the opportunity to share our thoughts with yourselves and the wider panel, and indeed whoever's listening. Just a brief introduction to myself. I'm working in the Department of Communications at Civil Service Ministry. I'm an alternate member on the governing board of the ECC, and very much leading on cyber policy from a communications networks perspective. In terms of where Ireland is at, and I just want to give that a kind of a brief kind of perspective as well to the rest of Europe. We're kind of very much Anglo-centric, and in that regard, a lot of our researchers are in terms of innovation, and our SME industry is very much focused on third countries, particularly the UK and the US, and that's something that was a key challenge for us in terms of facilitating a kind of cohesion in the European context. To what extent we can more or less, in the aftermath of Brexit, we can reorient a number of our key industry players, domestic indigenous players that is, towards the opportunities and obviously the networking opportunities and the market opportunities that arise in continental Europe. And in that respect, I suppose one of the key aspects would be our national cybersecurity strategy looks at protect, develop, and engage. And in regard to develop, that's really all about skills development, innovation in terms of developing a national cyber research program and some of the challenges around that. I'll come to that in a minute. There's also enterprise engagement through our national industry cluster, Cyber Ireland. And it is very much, I mean, a lot of our industry is very much kind of third country MNC based, or in terms of the supply chain as well. And that does present key challenges. And we do see key challenges with this regulation. I mean, our key focus is on the whole aspect of the open global approach in terms of the opportunities. And we need to be open and we need to be outward looking. And that's really where Ireland is coming from. We're very much keen to see international cooperation continue. We do note that obviously that there is an emphasis, and there has to be an emphasis, on building up our own indigenous technological capabilities, but that we also have to do that in a way that recognizes our external interdependencies. It was a key message that our minister delivered today in Brussels at a conference on the transatlantic cybersecurity, the transatlantic reboot, which is all about working together. And we need to look, yes, we need to look at strategic autonomy, but it has to be open strategic autonomy and about preserving, our open economy. That's very much the language in terms of the Council conclusions. And in that regard, that means reaching out as well to Dublin, and Dublin reaching out to Brussels. So we do need to build a common vision. We don't have a common vision in this place. We hear a lot about strategic autonomy. It doesn't mean much in Dublin in the context of an open global approach. We have a different view about what digital sovereignty means, and that was conveyed by our Taoiseach, our Prime Minister, to Commission President von der Leyen last March actually. So in effect, we need to have a common understanding about what we wish to achieve here. Yes, Europe needs to do far more. We need to connect together. We need to understand that we are one European community. And one of the challenges recently, in effect, was we ended up our national industry cluster in October. We had our first national conference in cybersecurity. We ended up with, in effect, a lot of speakers from the US, the UK, and we ended up with only one speaker from continental Europe. So in effect, we don't know each other. We do know each other in particular niche areas. We're certainly glad to know that there is Irish participation in CyberSec4Europe, in essence, and we need to see far more of that in the pilots. Our understanding of what ESCO is at working level is virtually non-existent. We've managed to get our national industry cluster to join ESCO recently, so we have key challenges there in terms of networking, in terms of building bridges, and in terms of building a common vision. And I suppose if I move beyond, particular concerns which we would have in an Irish context, what does that mean at a European level? Well, we are behind the curve here. We are far behind the curve, but we have key We have certain key advantages, in particular in terms of industrial AI, in robotics, etc. Europe is an exporting bloc, and we need to realize that as well. So we need to realize our share of global GDP is shrinking in an international context, and we need to retain that open outward global approach. Yes, in terms of where do we need to go here, we see the opportunities in terms of Digital Europe program, and we need to understand, well, where's the balance here? Are we looking at fundamental research? And in an Irish context, our research community is highly fragmented. It's also very, very competitive, which is not, I suppose, to a certain degree, ideal when you're trying to foster collaboration and you're trying to foster a common sense of what is the national cybersecurity community and how does that fit with the broader European cybersecurity community. So we see key advantages in the regulation in regard to understanding who is the community from the very diverse perspectives of civil society through industry, enterprise development, through to research, innovation, right around to resilience support measures, and where the SME fits in this picture as well is key. So we would like certainly to understand better how the various stakeholders more or less come together in terms of building a coherent picture in terms of what the agenda of the competence centre is going to be, and what that strategic agenda is going to be over the next NFF in effect. So to us, in effect, we need to be mindful as well of what's happening elsewhere in Europe in this space. We have the NIS2 directive, which will certainly bring a lot of challenges for SMEs. So there will be key baseline resilience supports needed. On the other hand, we need to look at innovation and we need to look at collaboration as well. I mean, our agencies, our public agencies in Ireland, we're focused on North-South collaboration on the island of Ireland with CSET in Queen's and Belfast and across the Atlantic. And that is something that we have to retain as well. In the European context, we need to retain that open, outward-looking approach. I mean, certainly we need to be clear that, to a certain degree, we're not necessarily at the cutting edge in enough areas around cybersecurity. Yes, and we see the great advantages that we're going to be doing in the context, and it's a pity it's not in the remit of the centre. I'm talking here about the Euro QCI initiative. So to what extent, can we as a community take ownership in terms of us as member states and working with civil society, working with the research community, with SMEs, with industry to kind of deliver something tangible and meaningful on the ground. We've got a huge challenge in terms of skills. There's some interesting work that's been ongoing in that space in the domestic context in Ireland, but also in the context of ENISA, etc. as well. So how, in effect, will ENISA work with the centre, I think is another key aspect, and how we make sure the centre has its own distinct kind of identity and role in this space. So I think I'll leave it there for the moment and hand back over to you, David. In terms of, I suppose, of national coordination centres, you made the point at the start. One of the key challenges we see with the NCC role, in effect, is we see a strong role for policy, we see a strong role for industry engagement and development, and then the middle bit about enterprise supports. That to us is an area that's kind of key, is quite challenging for us in essence, because we're not clear about how cascade funding is going to work in a domestic context. So how that's going to work, the level of autonomy that's going to be available, what are the implications in terms of state aids, in terms of other regulatory arrangements in place, and also what does it mean in terms of oversight and audit and accountability in terms of taxpayers' funding. So I think I'll leave it there and hand back to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, James. I was hoping that nobody would mention Brexit, but didn't happen. I mentioned earlier on in the preamble slides that about roundtables came from the Knights of the Roundtable, and I feel that you've thrown down your gauntlet as a knight to the others. We heard from Christian about the over-reliance on faraway countries and issues around digital sovereignty, the thorny issue. And you've raised the very important point of the Irish perspective and the very strong Anglo and transatlantic links that exist, which is a strong dose of Irish reality, which is very useful to have in this discussion. A lot of questions that you raised about common vision and working together and the lack of common understanding, which I think is probably one of the characteristics that one can come away with. Again, we come back to this word diversity. One of the questions that's come up, because it's a good time to go to the questions, is from Antonio Scamita from University of Murcia. When you're thinking on communities, are you thinking on individual entities, or also considering regional communities or either sectoral communities? And what could be the impact on governance of the national communities? We've been around the table, so that's a question for anyone who wishes to pick up and respond to. Just put up your hand. And one of the other questions that Antonio posed was, how do you see the roles of the cybersecurity atlas in the creation of a community? I'm sure you're all familiar with the work that the JRC have been doing in creating the Atlas program. Celia, you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'll just try to answer the first question a little bit, because it was something I wanted to mention earlier, but I didn't, so I'll mention it now, which is that in Norway, usually the highest technical competence on cybersecurity is situated in the research communities, meaning universities, basically, and research institutes. And then on the other hand, it's also situated in the public sector, and that's where it's really concentrated. For example, cyber range and ability to test and certification, these kinds of capacities. And then another challenge that we face in that area is that there are extreme sectoral divides within the public sector, because everyone has their very clear mandate. So you don't want to necessarily step into someone else's mandate. And so when we think about communities, it's very much sector related, at least for me and from my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. Anyone else want to respond to that? Yeah, Christian.
Yeah, maybe I want to introduce another thought in this scene. I think it's very good that the Competence Center regulation sets up a governance scheme for all these communities, because we need to bring them together in a structured way. But in the end, I don't think it's the most important part, because the most important part in building up these communities is building up trust. And trust is effectively built not between institutions, may they be regional or sectorial or whatever, but it's trust between people. And that is what we finally have to achieve. I know it's very complicated to put this into a regulation, and I can very well understand why Miguel and his team didn't put this in the regulation, because it cannot be regulated. But I hope that in the end, our governance structures will help us enabling this trust between these communities. Yeah, because in the end, you have to be able to talk about ideas which might lead into products, but which are not mature for products. And if you don't trust your counterpart, you wouldn't maybe tell him your ideas on certain cybersecurity aspects. So I think the necessity of building up trust between the actors is of paramount importance for the National Competence Center, and finally also for the European Cybersecurity Center. We should keep this in mind before we're getting lost too deep into structural questions, which are important, but which are not the paramount case, in my opinion.
Trust is a fundamental of everything we do in terms of collaboration and particularly reaching out beyond the conoscenti to the SME community or to citizens, engendering trust is absolutely vital, and that goes without saying between regions and different communities. Natalia has raised her hand. Natalia.
Thank you, David. I was wondering, so the issue of trust and the lack thereof and the disconnectedness of the community has been an issue that's been brought up a lot this evening. But I was wondering, so it's a question more to Christian, but of course to everybody who would like to respond. Say, if we have these community members as the registered community members, that's the idea that's out there. Do you think it would help to build up trust if somebody knows, okay, this is the registered community member, it's safe to go there with our ideas or something like it? Or do we need, because Juan who mentioned something like working groups and I think Yanis mentioned other forms of involvement, like encouragement to become part of the community. So what would be then what would be the good tools and the good instruments for that? Would it be enough to have a registered community member? So do we need to be more proactive let's say in a coordinated way in the whole European Union? Maybe more forms of organization, more bodies are needed to involve the community better, or maybe they will just create unnecessary complications. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. Thank you.
Anyone want to take that one? Yes, Christian.
Yeah, Natalia, you asked me directly, so I try to answer this. I think we need both. I think it's a good idea to have a kind of a registration or enlisting process for members of the community, because we have to be a little bit cautious that this is the community that we really want, and not undercover persons or institutions that do not really belong to a European cybersecurity community. But we should not overestimate this in the discussions on the regulation. We almost had arguments against too complicated and too complex structure of registration, of certification, because this might be distracting for interesting persons or interesting organizations, especially from SMEs or young researchers, because if I have to go through such a registration process, well, maybe I won't do it. But in the end, the second part, I think, what you mentioned is even more important, bringing these people together in workshops, in discussions, because that's the only way where you really can build up trust by personal contacts. Yeah. Maybe even by video conferencing contacts, but I hope we will overcome this. But by personal contacts, by seeing that you are going into the same direction, share the same goals, and then you start sharing experiences and talk openly also about problems and issues. And I think we have to achieve both. We must not end up in a bureaucratic monster of registration processes, but in a workshop atmosphere of people of all kinds working together. I think that's more important in the end.
Thanks, Christian. James, you raised your hand.
Yeah, just maybe to second kind of Christian's kind of comments on the whole issue of trust. I mean, we need to understand, we need to be a common baseline. We need to know each other, but on the other hand, we need to make sure if we have a registration process, the first question that I would be asked is, well, what's the benefits in joining it? What's in it for me as a researcher or as a community? And it needs to be clear, those benefits need to be clear and self-evident in essence to justify. It needs to be representative of the stakeholders on the ground in essence. And to a certain degree, we do need to see much more outreach, much more networking taking place, because it's only with engagement that we're actually going to get to know each other in essence in a way that facilitates more or less collaboration and working together. I mean, to a certain degree, we hear the message even from public enterprise agencies in Ireland, don't bother with the EU system. It's bureaucratic, it's an insiders. Once you're inside in the bubble, once you know how to write proposals, it's easy. And it is to a certain degree. Once you're in the system, you know how it works, you've got a network, but how do you break into the network? I think it's the key question. How do you break into into the network in terms of more or less coming in from outside. And I'm talking here about SMEs. I'm talking here about indigenous players, and I'm also seeing in Ireland, in this sector, for example, in cybersecurity, we have about maybe 8,000 people employed in cybersecurity. Over half of them work for MNCs, multinational companies. They are EU citizens with fundamental rights to employment. And we need to be clear about this. If we have a skills shortage in Europe, if we have skills and we have people who are skilled in cybersecurity and they're EU citizens and not working for indigenous European companies, where is the strategy in terms of migrating these people with skills to work for European owned and controlled enterprises? So that's an example as to where we need thinking. We need to understand it from the perspective of the employees, of staff, of researchers on the ground as well. How does this make sense in essence to us, and how does this work in essence? Again, some of the reticence we're having in Ireland over establishing the NCC as our enterprise agency is saying, hold on a minute here, what does this mean in terms of state aid? We don't like this language about sovereignty. It is alien to us. How do we, in effect, so we've got the challenge of trying to sell this on the ground to public authorities in Ireland, in essence, and saying, how is this going to work in practice? So we need to have a basic policy dialogue that more or less sets out, something that all 27 member states can sign up to, because that's not the case today. And I think that needs to be a common baseline. It needs to come to the strategic agenda, and it will have to be sufficiently diverse. But it also needs to support European cohesion here. And that's really, really important. We need to improve European cohesion. It's in the regulation, etc. We need to bring people together, and we need to build, when we bring people together, we can build on what we have together. If we end up with a highly contentious agenda where there is fragmentation, there is a danger of further fragmentation. And we do need strategic autonomy. We need open strategic autonomy, but we also need to see how we can do that in the world as it exists today. And that is an incremental process. We see that as an incremental process rather than a large step change. And we need to understand the changes in the worlds that are happening around us.
Thank you, James. The need for the conversation and the collaboration has come through loud and clear, I think, from all of the speakers. Would you see that conversation you mentioned about the member states need to work together? Do you see that happening through the national coordination centers or through communities like the ones we have here, lower down in the framework, as it were?
If I go back to you, David, on this, I think it has to happen on all dimensions. It has to take place, it's a policy conversation. It's a policy, a conversation as to, well, what is the network of national coordination centers? Is it something along the lines, we've had a discussion, is it some sort of bureaucratic, we devise rules of procedure and we set out what it is as if we were in comitology in the commission? Or is it something that's much more fluid? We have yet to understand, even, I suppose, how should the network evolve? And then, of course, there's the community itself. Yes, I think it's fantastic that we'll get to identify national communities in respect to the NCC process. But how do they become European communities? I think is the key question. And how do you, and to what extent, what's their role, what's their perspective in terms of building this cohesion? Thank you.
Good questions. I'm tempted to ask the question. Whenever I get tempted, I usually do. Is because we're coming to the end of our time. How do you see and I mentioned this earlier on, how do you see the 4 pilots and EXO being able to facilitate some of the issues that have been raised and some of the things that James has just talked about over the coming months of the pilots? How can we help? Yes, Juan Diaz.
I think I mentioned before, the experience of EXO, it's an experience of, it's a success story. It was created in 2016, so it's been 5 years of a success. And I think they have a lot of members, and so they can provide a lot of expertise and guidance. Miguel said at the beginning that they are close in cooperating with the Commission, so their vision is really important. We are expecting EXO to provide guidelines, a white paper, I don't know, any format, but some information, because we are here in a debate and we see it from different perspectives how to organize that community, and I think there is not a magic solution. So any guidance based on a success story is always welcome. And at the same time, pilots are also very, very important. You had an experience how to organize the projects with a lot of different entities from more than 12 member states. I think it was a requirement from the beginning. So you have an inside experience organizing different people from different entities, from different countries, from research, from industry, from SMEs. So you have that experience. But at the same time, it was in the mission of those pilots to have a working package regarding a community. So I think it would be a good idea if you work closely together, the four of you, to create also a white paper, some recommendations, and whatever. So you have some deliverables inside of your single project, but if you finally get close together and produce one single document, it will be really valuable. So yeah, for us, EXO for pilots are very, very important, and I think this is the moment for them to contribute, because it is written in the regulation that the creation of national communities is a duty of the NCCs. So and I think the Commission said that on the previous workshop. So it's our duty. So it's up to us, and so we need help, and I think you can contribute a lot.
If anyone else has anything to say, oh yes, Natalia.
Sorry, a very short interjection. Actually, we happen to already be working on something similar to what you have described, the joint interpilot white paper on governance. Dirk, my colleague from the governance focus group, is present here. So we are sort of already doing what you said there is need of, but of course we cannot do it well if we don't get the input from what is needed and how we can help. So, which is why events like this are very valuable. Then we get to hear from the practitioners, from people dealing with it, with what they need. So, sorry, that was just very short. The paper will be there, but please give me more material to make it useful for you.
Thank you, Natalia. If I may, Miguel, would it be possible, would you be interested in finishing off our event this evening by giving us some feedback on what you've heard from the community representatives?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Fine.
Okay, I'm going to try my camera again. This time I have to select it and then... Okay, you can also see me now, I think. Very interesting. I heard quite a few things here. I'm really, to be very clear, when it comes to this, all these topics, the cybersecurity, the Commission, what the Commission is trying to do, has been trying to do is to facilitate, basically, to come up with this framework. And then it was taken up actually by member states and the Parliament, who actually changed a number of things in the proposed framework by the Commission. And that's what we are there for. Then it's a diverse world, as it was said at the beginning. We heard about the challenges. Somehow there's some commonalities across those challenges. That's clear. So for me, what is crucial in this whole construction is the role of the national coordination centers. You know, and that it will be a diverse approach to things as well there, because obviously different member states, they have their own approaches, and that's very good, and that's very valid. But for me, it would be quite important to kind of consolidate a bit that network of national coordination centers, and to do so in a way that is not bureaucratic, to pick up on some of the comments from James. I totally agree on that, but still find those commonalities, aggregate that, you know, those messages from the ground, from the communities, and pick them up to the top, as it were. In this case, well, to the competence center that will be responsible for preparing the programs, in particular the funding programs, but also to take actions at European level, and it will be quite important to achieve that balance before. That goes back to the initial, to the start of this panel, which is diversity, very valid, but some form of coordination, some you know, some framework to derive a bit common agendas. So that would be the key of this let's say, initiative. It's very difficult in cybersecurity. I think we can acknowledge that came up in the negotiations of this proposal for regulation. We were often from the Commission saying, listen, we had done something different recently with this Euro HPC, where we also created a body, and then member states and others, they were telling us, yes, but you know, that's a very clear kind of agenda, because it's very specific, where cybersecurity, you know, is so diverse, the challenges are moving so fast and whatever. And at the same time, a recognition from all those around the table, member states and also from Parliament, that, and yet something must be done about it. We cannot just stand still. It was complicated at times during negotiations, you know, to agree all the views are on the table, but then at the end of the day, realization, but we need to come up with something. It's not good enough that we go back and say, listen, we didn't manage to agree amongst ourselves in this framework. So there were many things that were said, very important priorities, but I have a kind of obsession about this framework, yeah, this governance system that will be created collectively, that is flexible and yet allows for collaboration. It's at the level of the center, the competence center is kind of well defined in the regulation itself, and then the governing board will structure, and then, you know, at the end of the day, 29 people, 30 people are on the table, one can manage. Then when you go to the level of national coordination centers, it becomes more difficult, because national coordination centers, they have lots of people behind them. I think that level will be really critical to you know, to make the connection between the European level and the community. I mean, at the level on the ground. This is where I think an effort should be done, and then all people here, they have a very important role at you know, in articulating this collaboration within with the member states, which I know is not easy at all. At European level, it's challenging, but also at European level. So I stop here. I said nothing on substance, on the priorities like education or so. I took note of the challenges there. But I think at the level of the Commission at this stage, what we need to do is to really facilitate this framework, this collaboration framework, and then we will continue doing so, organizing meetings with national coordination centers, trying to support, you know, organizing facilitating the funding support that will come up next year. And this is what we're really trying to do. This cannot be a top-down exercise by no means. That's clear. And with that, I will stop there. Thanks, David, and all participants.
Thank you, Miguel, for that summary and perspective. We're out of time already, so I'd like to thank all the participants: Christian, Eddie, Juan Diaz, Yanis, James, Matteo, Celia, and of course Natalia. for your contributions this evening. I think we've learned a lot about the diversity, the challenges and the aspirations that we were hoping to hear from this evening. Natalia, I've no doubt will keep in touch with all of you and take heed of some of the things that we've learned, and also this need for communication and collaboration and networking, which is so vital. And with that, I'd like to thank you again, and thank you to the participants for listening and putting your thoughts and comments into the chat. And I'd like to, I think there was something else, but I've forgotten what it is. Anyway, it's probably time to go and get something to eat. Yeah, I see some smiling faces around me, so that obviously was the right thing to say. So thank you all again, and I look forward to meeting many of you in the future in this wonderful cybersecurity community that we live in. Thank you and good night.
Good night.